Hannah Pleb, so today's video we're going to be discussing YCS Seattle.
Face me, give in to your pride.
If you haven't been living under a rock, you've probably noticed that a lot of the top cut lists from YCS Seattle were Zoo. Now, everyone's favorite deck, or archetype, should we rather say. Engine, more of an engine than a deck, right? This deck, since its inception in OCG, has dominated all throughout, regardless of which sort of variant it's been involved in. It's been pure, it's been kaiju mixed, it's been masterpiece mixed, it's been eidolon and invoked mixed. Artifacts, literally anything that you can kind of think of. Infernoid as well. Minerva as well. Like anything you can really think of that's Metalfoes as well. Anything that you can kind of think of has been played with this deck. Now it's kind of crazy. Burning Abyss as well. Anything that you can really think of has been tried at some point during this last sort of like month or so. And OCG especially had a lot of different variants going out throughout their formats, all the way up to where we are now, which is like Maximum Crisis for them. But it's a little bit different for us because now we're in a situation where we've had our very first event with the new deck. We do have a new set coming out this weekend, but the weekend after that, or I think it's this weekend actually, we have YCS Atlanta, or maybe the week after, I'm not sure. It's a bit strange because Konami's sort of planning, which I guess you could say is maybe a bit of a topic for a different discussion altogether. YCS Atlanta, having one single event for one set is really strange, and honestly not good enough. I think that all regions of the world should have enough to play with one set. I think that it would be smart of Konami to make the YCSs perhaps bi-weekly in terms of, you know, on the international level. So 2 weeks later we'd have YCS Prague, rather than having this thing where, you know, we have YCS Seattle and then 2 weeks later we have YCS Atlanta, and then 2 weeks later we have YCS Prague, and then there's nothing for like months. And even then there's like YCS Vegas, which is like apparently rumored to be on the same weekend as Prague or the week after. So it's like the formatting is really just stupid to begin with. But that's just a bit of a sidetrack tangent. Now we're talking about Zoo here. Having it for one format and one sort of event is kind of a little bit skewing the results. I mean, YCS Seattle is just one event. We're never going to see how good this deck actually is in a vacuum by itself. Just because of the fact that now we're going to a format where we have Fusion and Forces come out with plenty of new archetypes, most importantly the Invoked archetype. So really we don't get to you know, play another event and see how Pure Zoo and Kaiju Zoo evolve going forward. Perhaps it could be that people just play the exact same list card for card the next event. It could be a case, it could be not, but that's the thing, we won't know, just because of how close together the YCS have been structured for some reason. So there is that. Now, the thing that I really wanted to kind of talk about, now that we've got that sort of basic introduction out of the case, is, well, if you haven't been, you know, sort of, if you have been keeping up with the meta, you would have realized 30 out of the 32 decks were Zoo variants, mostly Kaiju, mostly Pure, 2/3, and everything else was just one of everything else, basically. Minerva, Infernoid, Metalfoes, even like fucking Zombie. I think that was actually Minerva as well, but yeah. A lot of those decks playing Zoo. Now, basically, the fundamental question we now need to ask is that bad? Is that a bad thing? Does this need a ban list? Does this need some sort of tuning? It's really... Now, I think for most parts, let's just kind of take a step back, because a lot of people would be saying to themselves, 30 out of 32 decks, that's like 90% top. That's just absurd. That deck needs hit. Now, the thing is, it's not really that simple. Kaijus have been kind of the dominant engine in the deck. Pure as well was technically more spots than Kaiju, but a lot of people do like the Kaiju variant. I think that was the most represented, but not actually the most that topped. So I mean, that's kind of a discussion for another time. But the thing is, everything else sort of stood a chance, and especially with the new set coming out, Invoked Zoo is going to be a deck as well. Now, in previous years, you could kind of understand, because you think to yourself, well, Dragon Rulers took all these different tops, and Spellbooks took all these different tops. We need to hit Judgment, we need to hit fucking Rulers to 1, etc, etc. That makes sense. When Pepe happened, it made sense that Luster needed a hit, Face Off needed a hit, fucking Joker needed a hit, Keyboard needed a hit, all these things needed hits. And it makes sense because, most of the deck was those cards. However, in this case scenario, Zoo is not really anything overpowered or unfair. It's more of an engine that complements other decks. And what it does through one card is absolutely kind of absurd. But the thing you need to take into consideration is that it's just made everything else better. Now, rather than like hitting Zoo, I think the better question would be like, is it good where we're at just now? Because despite the fact that Zoo is played in everything, it's not every deck is Zoo, card for card. Like everything's different. It's actually really diverse. There was Frog Zoo that topped. There was Minerva Zoo, Menaphos Zoo. All of these different archetypes mixed in with Zoo, yes. But the thing that I think is just really interesting, the thing that I actually quite like about this format, is because even though we are playing this little mini engine, it's still really cool because it means that you can innovate upon your other archetypes. You can play this deck in literally anything. Like, that's not even this deck. You can play this engine in anything, and it just makes it a little bit better. Like, there is no archetype in the game that Zoo doesn't just fit in. Like, all it takes is, like, 6 cards, 7 cards, 3 Terratop, 3 Rat, like 8 extra deck cards, and that's it. You've got yourself a strong deck already. Like, it doesn't fucking matter if it's Blackwings or Mermail or just anything that's just not great right now. Will sort of work, and I think that's amazing to have this, like, this kind of format, which makes me really sad because we all know for a fact that Terratop is probably going to be the first one to get hit. I don't think they'll hit Zoo cards directly. Who knows when this ban list would be? It has to be soon, really. It can't. It just. I don't see this ban list being. There's no way they'll let this like last through the whole of like next month. I think it has to be hit by the end of next month. And it's really sad because the decks that sort of, the cards that kind of help this become a better deck are probably the ones that are going to be hit. So Terratop, I think, is very likely to be hit, which is unfortunate because it's a cool little thing that you can just put in every deck and it just makes it better, Fucking people were playing this in Monarchs last year. Burning Abyss started playing it as a staple. Just Terratop was just such a cool card. And for some reason, Konami will probably just end its reign that way rather than hitting Zoo cards directly. If they hit Rap here, that's a whole different story. But let's jump that hurdle when we get to it. I'm sure we'll last until Maximum Crisis without a single Zoo card being touched. Hopefully. Because my theory is that they'll hit things like Invoker, they'll hit Terratop. But I really hope that they don't hit the Zoo cards themselves. It'll be interesting to see how things develop until then. Now, basically, if you take anything away from this video, I'm just kind of musing and thinking about the idea of, are we really in a bad position? Is 30 out of 32 tops really that bad? When you think of it out of context, and you think to yourself, 30 out of 32 spots were taken by one single archetype, you think to yourself, oh, that's really overpowered. But again, like I said, taking it in context, the fact that this deck just complements every other engine, that this deck just makes every other deck a little bit better, makes every other archetype a little bit stronger, it just helps everything do what it needs to do better. It gives you a little bit more defense, gives you a little bit of more offense, gives you power play. It just gives you a comeback play. This deck offers everything. And I just think it's fantastic. And I think it's cool that, you can play this in anything. One other advantage I found as well is that once you've invested in Zoo, you can afford any deck. Like, if you can afford 3 Barrage, let's be realistic. If you can afford 3 Barrage and Invoker, like, let's be realistic. You can afford anything, right? If you can buy that much, then you can buy Merophos, because Merophos isn't expensive. Like, it's like the Zoo cards that are expensive, the extra deck, right? It's the fucking Barrage. And even then, if you play Merophos, you don't even need to run Barrage. Like, it's been proven that you don't need to run Barrage to do well with that deck. So, I feel like there's still somewhat budget options, because the extra deck cards, the secret rares, you're paying like £20 for like the secret rare. I don't think that's a lot to ask for. The only really expensive card is Invoker. Understandably, if you don't want to fork out that much for that, then, you might have to cut the Terratop engine, and then at that point you might as well just not play the Rats at all. But I feel like this deck could last a long time, and, if you're playing if you're going to play it, I still feel like it's somewhat budget to an extent. And the most important thing, like I said, is just the fact that you can put it in everything. This deck just works in everything, and I love that. And I really don't want to see it go yet. I don't want to see it be hit soon. So I really just want to enjoy this for 2 or 3 events. and then after that, you know, we can see where we're at. But you know, for the most part, and currently where we're at just now, I really like this new engine. I think it's fantastic. I think it is strong, but I don't think it's game breaking. 30 out of 32 sounds game breaking in your head, but like I said, if you just see how many different other decks topped, you realize that, you know, it still promoted a lot of diversity, despite the fact that, you know, 2/3 of it was two different decks. Is that really that much? We've seen worse. Like, we've seen worse, you know? Like, let's say, what was it? Pure Zoo took 11 top cut spots. We've seen worse. We've seen worse come from one deck, you know? This has been worse, and it lasted longer. So, who's to say? This might last a lot longer as well. Again, the important thing is to not look at Zoo as a deck. Look at it as an engine that you can put in anything, and I think that's just what I personally love about it so much. So, if you've watched this if you've watched this far, give me a hashtag Team Zoo in the description, because I picked up those barrages. I'm sorry, guys. I joined Team Zoo. So, hashtag Team Zoo if you've watched this far. And let me know, do you think it's a bad thing? Is 30 out of 32 tops a bad thing? Is Zoo bad for the game? Is this whole archetype just shit and garbage, and is it bad? Is it bad? I don't think so, but let me know what you think, and I guess we'll see you later.
Come, face me.